Despite all of its charm, Astro gets a 6 out of 10 from me. Arguably the first anime I ever watched, and one that I'm currently rewatching and finally finishing, was Ranma. I didn't really get invested into anime at the time. I watched a handful of other things, but mostly just big names that I was recommended, and I definitely didn't look into anything else by Rumiko Takahashi. That means a lot of Astronaut's inspirations are a little lost on me. No Maison Ikkoku or Urusei Yatsura to call back to, but those predecessors are clear even without knowing the sources in depth. Fortunately, there's a fairly good reason I've not gone back to most of those shows yet. They're fairly intense most of the time and rely heavily on an almost slapstick style of comedy, and neither of those are things I'm a fan of. That isn't to say they're always bad, but the margin of error is slight. The smallest mistake with the cast or the comedic timing makes the show feel more irritating than refreshing. Astro, unfortunately, falls on the wrong side of that line more often than not. It opens with some signs of promise, but a disappointing sidecast and a reliance on the same few gags being redressed and presented as new hurts the show. It already felt like a tribute more than an original series, and the repetitive nature of the comedy doesn't help on the originality front. The cast are the biggest offenders here. Mira is about as bland a female lead as you can get, but she looks fantastic when she's compared to the other residents of Astro Lodge. Matsubara does improve as the show continues, so it's a little harsh to say they're all terrible, but Shoin and Aoi get worse as the show progresses, so it never feels like it's improving on the character front. Central to all of this is Takumi, Astro Lodge's chef and the show's protagonist. Outside of being a little eccentric, mostly as a response to some love triangle chaos, he's pretty devoid of personality, which might be a criticism in most shows, but it's about as good as it gets here. He's the first of the residents to learn Mira's secret, and he becomes a key player in everyone's individual stories. And the secret in question is that Mira and her dog, Naosuke, are actually aliens looking for a key that was hidden at Astro Lodge decades before. Attackers from another planet are trying to steal that key, though, and the usual shenanigans follow from there. And by the usual shenanigans, what I mostly mean is a tangled mess of misunderstandings and chaotic attempts to stop the thieves, all wrapped up in the personal stories and love triangles of the residents. The love triangle itself is mostly fine, although never great. There are some wild turns toward the end where Astro seems to suddenly remember that it's a sci-fi show as well, but that isn't enough to save it from the 9 or 10 episodes before that. It also isn't helped by Shoin, Aoi, and Naosuke being mostly unlikable characters, so their heavy involvement in Mira and Takumi's stories feel terrible, mostly because it means that they have more screen time per episode. Some people will absolutely adore this show, especially those who care more for it as a nostalgia trip than as its own thing. And honestly, it's not that bad. Mira and Takumi's back and forth love story is handled fairly well, ignoring the interferences of other characters. And a couple of the lodge's residents aren't terrible, most notably Matsubara and Ren. Unfortunately, some of the other cast members, Ren's father, are absolutely awful. And the narrative is a disaster, so I'm definitely not a fan of this one. It has some charm to it, but that quickly wears off, and what's left underneath is mostly disappointment. If you like this video and want to read more of my reviews ahead of the video releases, or if you'd like to support me in making these, check out the links in the description, and I hope to see you here again for the next one.